Hello, this is Pete the Tech Guy, and we are back for yet another one of our interviews with immigrants, a series of interviews with people who were born in other countries who now live in the United States. And today's subject of interviews with immigrants, taking place here at Happy Jack's in Leominster because it's a great excuse to deduct a lunch, is Donald, originally born in Cameroon. Donald, thank you for joining us for interviews with immigrants.
No problem. How you doing?
Pretty good, except for the pretty part, which is a joke that my wife is sick of hearing me say. Now, unlike many of our other immigrants that we've talked to, in fact, unlike all of them, you came to America as a youth, and so your English, for example, is very good. You grew up learning English, and you speak English like a native. That's very useful compared to a lot of the other people here.
Yeah, I guess you'd say it's useful. My family's English is really not as good as mine, so the fact that I came here younger and I was able to learn and adapt to the American society here, I was able to better perfect my English, as you can see right now.
Now, you're around 30, if I'm not mistaken, and you came from Cameroon, which is in Central Africa, on the coast, correct? Or
The armpit of Africa. You could say it's the armpit of Africa if you look on a map.
and that's not a comment on Cameroon, but I'm going to ask you to comment on it. Now, you came here at the age of 7. What are your memories of Cameroon?
I don't really have not too many memories. I bounced around a lot in Africa. I lived in Ethiopia. I lived there with my dad. The only memories I can really think of is from birthday pictures when I was younger in Cameroon. But as I've grown older, the memories that my parents have told me about Cameroon are good memories and bring up bad memories for me. So it takes a lot of getting used to.
Now, were you born in Cameroon, and you moved to Ethiopia for a time, or did you move around within Africa, your family?
I was born in Cameroon. Lived in Cameroon for a bit, and then moved to Ethiopia with my dad. My dad and my mom's relationship kind of deterred, so it was kind of up in the air. But most of my time I was in Cameroon and Ethiopia, back and forth between my parents.
Okay, so one of your parents remained in Cameroon, and one was living in Ethiopia. So we talk about custody battles around here in the U.S. between states, but you're going through literally across Africa, back and forth. That must have been a little bit of a pain, to say the least.
Yeah, you could say it wasn't really a pain to see, because my parents were real cordial about who visited who, and most of the time I was with my dad, and my mom was off on retreats with her church, and when I was with my mom, my dad was off on diplomatic, I would say, trips. So it was really a back and forth between both of them.
So your mother was involved in your church, and your father was involved in diplomatic service?
Yeah, he was a diplomatic officer.
Now, what made him decide to come to the United States? Was he given a diplomatic assignment, or did he decide that this is where he wanted to be, or does he talk about that?
He doesn't really talk about it, but I think he came here because of at first his daughter, so my stepsister, and I guess once he got here, he figured that he'd, get his citizenship here and then hopefully go back to Cameroon and have a better understanding of how it was here in America.
Now, when you were young, in Cameroon, did you hear much about America? What did you, when you heard you're coming to America, what were you thinking at the time? I mean, obviously you were a young kid. You probably saw American culture on TV and movies. What did you think it would be?
I didn't really think of anything at that time. When I first came here, I thought I was just visiting my sister, who was already here in the States. And once we got here and, got to stay in a little bit, I guess my mom thought it was best that, I should stay here, better myself, because the education here was good, the healthcare is good, and far better than it was back home. So basically, her sacrificing herself for me to stay and her to go back home.
Now, how old was your sister who was already here?
Mm, 7. My sister is 49. My sister's 19 years older than me, so I guess maybe 25, 26 when she was here.
Now, was she in this area? You were in central Massachusetts, or was she in a different part of the country?
She was in Cambridge with my aunt. She was staying with my aunt.
All right, so you've come from Cameroon. Now, what are the native languages in Cameroon? What did you speak when you were back there?
Well, I spoke English or Cameroonian Pidgin, which is basically broken English, kind of like Spanglish, where it takes half of the American language and half of the African language. And that was the only language I really spoke. But aside from other languages there in Cameroon, there's French, which my parents spoke. There's Muslim languages in Cameroon. There's a lot of sign language in Cameroon. So it's a wide mix of languages out in Cameroon. But the most common to me would be English or Pidgin.
All right, so now you're 7 years old. You've come to America. Now, you've lived in Africa, either Cameroon or Ethiopia, all your life. That's got to be culture shock coming here and seeing America. I mean, what was your reaction as a kid? First seeing America. Did you come to you came, I presume, to Cambridge because you were visiting your sister? How did you react to the sights and sounds of America?
Culture shock wise, when I was back home, I used to watch American shows. So when I got here, it wasn't really much of a culture shock, but of how I was going to be able to fit in with the way society was over here, because it's the first time I was around a lot of, no offense, white people. So to see other nationalities around here other than my own was kind of, hard to describe, seeing as there were way more different cultures here than I had thought were. So it's to see Asians here, to see Spanish people here, to see Muslims here, it was a kind of a huge culture shock for me, because now I'm here in America, and America has shown me that we're all different in our own ways.
So you come here, you see, suddenly you're surrounded by all these different cultures, from white people, Spanish people, Asian people, instead of Cameroon, which I presume is mostly black, if not 90% black. So when did you first, obviously if you came here young, you were going to first visit, so you wouldn't have gone to school immediately. When did you start in school in America? Was it the next year, or?
I probably started school that first year, because I went to school, my first school was in Medford, Massachusetts, Osgood Elementary School, and I guess I got used to it, but my English wasn't good at the time, so they kept me back.
Now, you're also kind of tall. So, were you tall as a youth as well?
No, I was pretty small as a youth. I didn't start growing until maybe I was 21. I didn't start growing.
All right, because I was wondering, it's one, you have a new person in the class, but a new person in the class from another country who's very tall would have been a shock. So, how did your classmates react to you? Again, you're here from Africa. You've not been around people from other cultures. How were you accepted in the classroom, or were you, or did you keep to yourself, or?
I kept to myself at first, and then as I tried to open up, I was teased a lot I was bullied a lot when I came here because my English wasn't as good, and I was different than most people. But over time, I think that's one of the reasons why I've never been a fan of school, because my childhood kind of reflected how I would deal with people later on in my life.
Right now, you work with a lot of people from a lot of different cultures. It's fair to say at my work, and our work, I should say, because we work together, that English is the second language at the work. There's not a lot of Anglo-Americans. There's a lot of Spanish, a few people of different cultures. And they've come, unlike you, they came late in life to America. How do you view them in terms of how they're adapting versus you? I mean, it must be very different to watch them trying to pick up English at 30 or 40 or 50 when you came here at 7. How does that mix seem to you?
I think it's because you've been in a place for so long, and you're so used to speaking your language, you don't want to learn another language at all. And that's how most cultures are. And when they come to America, you feel like you can talk, the language that you speak, but you come to learn that English is a pretty big language here in America. And in trying to learn English, it's kind of hard for them, since they've been so used to speaking their language for so long, and for them to try to adapt to an English language, some people can pick it up, or some people have a hard time trying to adjust to the English language. So it just comes down to, are there people around to help them learn the language? Are they willing to learn a different language other than their own?
Now, I've got to ask you this because I've asked everybody else this. Now, obviously, if you're from Cameroon, Central Africa, you probably did not see a whole lot of snow in your first 7 years, and now you're living in Cambridge. What was your reaction when the snow came? That must have been... I'm very curious as to your opinion on the snow.
Cold, and something. Just the fact of shoveling and falling in yellow snow and realizing it's pee and dog doo-doo out in the snow and all that. At first I was just like, not again. And then over time it's like, I got so used to snow that the making of snowballs, blizzards, not going to school because of snowstorms. And over time it's gone to a point where I'm so used to snow now.
So it's not one of those things where you see snow and it's like, ah!
No, because when I first ate snow, ate snow. No, not the yellow one, folks. My sister is like, "What are you doing?" Because she's here for so long. I was like, "Well, it's a slushie," and she's like, "That's not how they make slushies over here in America. You need to go to the store for that." And over time, you just you learn that you can't do certain stuff here, but you can do other things here. So
now, have you become a naturalized citizen?
No, I don't think I would want to be naturalized citizen. Maybe no, because dual citizenship, it's hard. Because I would have dual citizenship. I have dual citizenship already. So if I wanted
no, but so you're a citizen of the United States and of Cameroon, or just Cameroon and Canada. So when were you in Canada?
Canada, maybe when I was 17.
And how long were you in Canada?
Maybe 3 years.
All right, now that's interesting. Now, obviously, Canada, another English-speaking country, but a very different, the same in a lot of ways, but also different in a lot of ways than America. How did you find Canada compared to the United States?
There's not really a big comparison between Canada and the United States. They're both same thing. A lot of people say Canada has better healthcare and all that mumbo jumbo, but it's just like the United States. The only difference is it's a border that separates the two, in my opinion.
What part of Canada were you in?
Toronto.
All right, so you went to Toronto for your later teenage years. You came back to the United States. Now, why did you decide to come back to the United States rather than stay in Toronto?
My family. My family is my mom, my sister. They're all here in Massachusetts or around Massachusetts, and being in Canada without family is kind of. I really couldn't see myself without my family at that time. So, and family's a big thing with me, where I've never been separated from my family for that long. So, for me to come back and be around family kind of gave me that idea that, my family meant everything to me.
Now, do you think of yourself again? You've been to Canada for a few years. You're here in America for a lot of years now. Do you still think of yourself as a person from Cameroon, or do you think of yourself as an American?
I would say a Cameroonian. Not saying that I'm not American, just you see the news, you see the way people are getting treated nowadays or over time, and everyone here is not treated the same as people would think, but America is home to me. If I were to go back to Cameroon, I really wouldn't adapt to where I'm from, because this is my home. I've been in America for so long that I can say I'm Cameroonian, but America is my home.
Now, I'd like to touch on that. You talked about the different cultures and some people being treated differently than others. Is there a different mindset in America than there is in either Cameroon or Ethiopia or even Canada? And is that something that you could really see when you think about it?
Yeah, in Africa or in any other African countries, you don't have freedom. That's the difference between America and Cameroon is there's no freedom. There's no law over there. There's no right to a trial. There's none of that. Like, the way my mom right now is back home, and it's not good. And it's not good back home. They're killing people, and it's hard for me to video chat her and talk to her about these things. And from her view, she says that everything's all right, and it's like, I don't know, it's hard for me to.
Have you tried to talk her into coming here?
Yeah, me and my sister have tried to talk to her. She's been here before, but she left, and she does not like America. And it's not because of the people or the laws. She's seen the way that people are treated over here, especially by the younger generation with respects to the older generation. And back home, respect is everything. And here in America, not too many people have respect for each other. And she sees that as, I can't live in a place where a younger person can't respect someone who's been here longer, someone who's much older than them, someone who knows more than them. And
that's something I've noticed. When I first was moved to the building where you're at, there were some young Arab men there. And they tended to show, because I was like 30 years older than them, they tended to show me a lot of respect. And I must admit, I liked it very much, because the old-fashioned way in America, when I was young, was younger people always respected older people, and then the 60s happened, and that kind of fell apart. But it's a very different culture in that regard, the respect for age.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I think in this generation now, the respect is way different than the respect that, that people had for each other back then.
Now you're working two jobs at the moment. You're helping to support a couple. So you're really, but I mean, you may decide to like America, but you're working hard. What's your goal?
My goal, well, my goal in life, have a family, not live paycheck to paycheck, because here in America everything is bills, 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 and bills, and I just want to set myself up where I could support my family, I could support myself, I can support, those close to me, and at the same time, I just want to live my life. But with the way, life is, we have our obstacles, bad things happen, and, you just have to learn to adapt to what society gives you.
All right, now, if you were to speak to someone from Cameroon, and I'm not talking about your mother specifically, but from someone who's from Cameroon, and they would say to you, I'm thinking of coming to America, what would you say to them in terms of should they come, and what is the main advice you would give them if they were thinking of coming here?
I would tell them to come. It's far better than what you're dealing with back home, because no one ever wants to deal with what's going on back home. And my advice to them would be not to be as trusting to people over here as you would be back home, because back home in Cameroon, trust is a big thing, and a lot of people trust each other, but once you come here to America, you can't be so gullible, so trustworthy of people where you tell them everything or you let them close to you, because people nowadays, they smile in your face and they screw you behind your back. So it's like you have to be well aware of who you surround yourself around. That's the best advice I would give them. But aside from that, just live your life, continue to do you, be a better person, and hopefully things work out for you.
Now, you've also, as we've already established in this interview, you've traveled a bit. You've been, Ethiopia, Cameroon, Canada, the U.S., and I don't know, I forgot to ask this. Have you been to different parts of the U.S., or basically have you stayed around the Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts area?
No, I've moved around. I've been to Washington, D.C., Illinois, Minnesota, Jersey. Those are about the only states I've been to in the United States.
Now, obviously, you're back here because you have family here, but if you did not have family, where in the U.S. would you want to settle?
Well, anywhere that doesn't have bipolar weather. I'm not a fan of New England weather, I just don't like I would like to live somewhere where it's just warm or rains, someplace where I can actually enjoy myself and,
Okay, now back to the question I was going to ask before I came to that. Now, obviously, you were here at 7 trying to adjust, and it's 23 years later. If there's advice, again, you're at age 30, that you would give your 10-year-old self, let's say, after just coming here to America, just recently here in America, to deal with things, what is the advice you would have given your younger self to put yourself in a better position than you are now? What would you tell him?
Wow, that's hard. My 10-year-old self, make sure that you don't mess up your credit. Try and be more understanding of the way things are around here instead of lashing out, at others. And I would just tell myself to just be mindful of what your goals are, what you want to set for your life.
Now, Americans, you've talked about coming to America, and you're seeing people, Spanish, white people, Asian people, a lot of us for the first time. Is there something that you see about Americans that you look at us and say, I mean, obviously you've been here a long time, so you're used to Americans and how Americans act, but is there something that you still look at Americans and say, this is odd, I don't understand why Americans act or do or think this particular way?
Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know why they like blood on their meat. That's something that's really odd to me. Another thing is, I feel like Americans think that they're better than everyone else. You always see it on TV where America is the best, America is the #1 nation, but America doesn't see it as other countries think that they're the same way. And I feel like Americans belittle those that are here because they think they're better. I think the way I see it, if you're American or American citizen, that you're above everybody. And I think a lot of immigrants, I'm not speaking for all of them, but I can speak for some. A lot of immigrants, feel like if America is the land of opportunity, how come we don't get the same opportunities as them?
Now, this is a slightly loaded question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. You talked about the freedoms, like you're a little freer here, you're safer here, and so forth, despite the flaws in America that you mentioned. Do you think Americans actually appreciate what they have to start with? The basic safety. I mean, yes, you have problems within the country. In fact, there was just a murder in the area last week. But do you think Americans really understand what they have?
Yeah, I think Americans, they understand what they have, but at the same time, they want more. And I think Americans have that mentality where they want more of what they have, whereas immigrants just are appreciative of what they have. I think that's the main difference between the thinkings of most Americans and most immigrants. Americans, not saying that Americans or immigrants don't strive for better, it's just a different mentality when it comes to wealth or to personal belongings or the way they go about their lives.
All right, and we're gonna close with this. If you could give Americans like myself one piece of advice when it comes to people who have come here from Cameroon or wherever about how to deal with, how to cope, how to get along, what would that advice be? And after you've given that advice, well, actually, I'll follow up with one other thing after that. But
advice I would give Americans: don't believe what everybody says about immigrants. It's just like the media. The media and newspapers and magazines, they portray immigrants as people that they're not. And people need to start realizing that media and magazines and paperwork don't tell you what a person is until you actually talk to them.
Which is one of the goals of interviews with immigrants, so people can actually hear immigrants in their own words. I'm going to give you the floor. Is there any last thing you would like to say to the people who would be listening to this on YouTube or seeing it on the blog? There's one thing you would like to say to the people listening that you'd like them to take away from this interview. What would that one thing be?
Well, the only thing I could say is just be you, be yourself. And if you can't be yourself around people, then people won't find out who the real you is.
All right, well, Donald, I want to thank you for giving me some of your time. And as I say, you work 2 jobs, so you giving us some time is an actual big sacrifice for you. So thank you so much for being on Interviews with Immigrants. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of hours at work.
Yeah, same here.
All right, and that is Donald from Cameroon, and he is the latest in our series of Interviews with Immigrants. We're going to hope that the goal is for us to do at least 30 different countries and 50 different people to get a sense of what immigrants think of America. And I hope you like this series of interviews. And if you think that this work is worthwhile, I would ask you to favorite the video on YouTube, share the playlist, and of course, go to the website, detechguyblog.com, DATECHGUI blog.com, and hit the tip jar, because that'll help pay for the lunch we just had. For Donald and for myself, this is Pete the Tech Guy saying so long, and thank you for spending some time with us.